All right, good afternoon, everyone. It's 3 o'clock on the dot. So let's dive in to today's presentation. Welcome to Corporate Grants for Fiscally Sponsored Projects. As should be fairly self-explanatory from the title of today's webinar, guess what we're covering? This is going to be a quick and dirty rundown of ways to identify and solicit grants or sponsorship from corporations that could be a good fit for you as an artist, for your artistic project, or for your arts organization. I hope everyone can hear the sound of my voice. In fact, if someone wouldn't mind using the GoToWebinar chat functionality to confirm that you can hear me speaking, that would be super helpful. Great. Thank you so much for confirming. And can you also quickly confirm that you can see a slide that says Fractured Atlas, Corporate Grants for Fiscally Sponsored Projects, and my name? Great. Fantastic. There was a time when, so I've been at Fractured Atlas for 5 years, and there was a time that I started giving a webinar not too long ago. And I got about 10 minutes through my spiel before someone chimed in using the chat functionality asking, is this thing still happening? Because I forgot to turn my microphone on. So it's helpful for me to know that I'm not just speaking out into the void and that I don't need to start over. So you're welcome to use the chat function to ask me questions throughout today's presentation, but there will be a dedicated time at the end for Q&A. So unless your question is relevant to what I'm talking about at the time, I'm probably going to save it for the end of the presentation, but feel free to chat me throughout. And also, tomorrow I will be emailing all attendees a link to a recording of this webinar, as well as a copy of the slides. So there's really no need for you to take copious amounts of notes. Just sit back, relax, and ask questions if you have them. Again, my name is Nathan Zabidio. I'm a program specialist in our fiscal sponsorship program, and I've worked at Fractured Atlas for the last 5 years, where I've helped empower artists and arts organizations to become more effective fundraisers. And as there might be some different levels of experience with our organization among attendees on this call, I wanted to give a little bit of brief context for who Fractured Atlas is and what we do. We're a nationwide nonprofit art service organization that helps artists with the business side of what they do so that they can spend more time focusing on what's important to them, which is creating their art. To that end, we provide online software-based business solutions, for example, fiscal sponsorship, which is where we extend some of the benefits of our 501c3 status to artists and arts organizations so that they can solicit nonprofit tax-deductible sources of funding. And most corporate grants or corporate sponsorship opportunities are only going to be available to 501c3s. So this is one door that we can help open for you. Let's talk a little bit specifically about what we're going to cover today. So first, we're going to identify what exactly we mean by corporate support, because if there's to be a Venn diagram with overlapping circles of foundation support and corporate giving, they do overlap to a large extent. So a lot of the best practices and tips and tricks for soliciting institutional support from foundations will also apply for corporations, but there are some unique things to consider with corporate grants. We're going to talk about developing appropriate messaging for corporate support. Again, it is going to be related to, but slightly different from what you're going to be pitching to foundations. So there are some unique things for you to keep in mind about the priorities that corporations have when they make donations or when they make sponsorship pledges to artists and arts organizations. We're going to discuss some tips and tricks for finding and identifying corporate funders that might be right for you. And part of that is that we're going to have a list of recommendations for corporate grants for you to start with, so that you're not just flying in blind, but you've got some referrals from us, but also ways to research this list further so that you can winnow it down to maybe 1 or 2 prospects that are truly the appropriate fit for you and what you're doing. And then finally, we're going to end by talking a little bit about our grant review process, because that might be useful for you to keep in mind as you map out what your strategy will look like and create a timeline for writing your proposal, getting it to us, and then forwarding it on to the funder for them to review. But first, okay, so corporate giving versus foundation giving. Both of these fall under the wheelhouse of corporate sponsorship because they're 2 different ways that businesses administer their charitable giving. So one is through corporate giving, where they are dedicating a portion of their business's budget, setting it aside for sponsorship opportunities. So this generally sits in its own separate fund, but still under the administration of the business, likely run by uh, an individual on staff or a handful of individuals, maybe on a part-time basis, maybe on a full-time basis. And these are funds that go to charities that fit the corporate criteria for giving, and that would often involve some kind of quid pro quo. So, for example, a local business that's sponsoring a youth athletic team that's going to donate money so that they can purchase uniforms, but that's also going to put the name of their business on the back of their uniforms or at the local stadium or on posters. And very often on a local business or even a large business's website, if they have a corporate giving program, there'll be a dedicated page to that. So, for example, if I were interested in soliciting Coca-Cola for a donation for my project, maybe because there's a local Coca-Cola distribution plant in my hometown. This is a very real example. I live in a town where there's or I'm from a town in Connecticut where there's a Coke distribution plant. So if I were to want to solicit them for a donation, I'd probably just type into a Google search Coca-Cola corporate giving and find the page on their website that would offer more info about their application process and guidelines. Separately, corporations might also set up a foundation to administer their corporate giving. And this is an independent nonprofit organization, which is an important legal distinction that probably won't matter to you as an applicant, but the funds that are in this foundation aren't part of the corporation's larger annual budget. The corporation itself is donating a percentage of its funds or a portion of its funds over to this independent foundation, as well as soliciting donations from other individuals or other corporations, or hosting charity fundraisers like a golf event or something like that. And Many people, both inside and outside the company, might assume that foundation giving and corporate giving are one and the same. And to the extent that the giving criteria might be similar, they are, but there are important differences. So legally, an independent foundation can't make grants or donations to charities that provide a direct benefit back to the company. So there's less of that quid pro quo that you would see on the corporate sponsorship, corporate giving side. So if you were to receive a donation from the Target Foundation, let's say, and not Target, you would indicate that in your list of donors, funded in part by the Target Foundation. And it wouldn't be an advertisement or big banner logo for Target, but it would be support from the Target Foundation. And where you would look for more information about a corporation's foundation giving, likely there is some information about that on the corporate website, but you should look at websites like GuideStar, GuideStar, or the Foundation Center to look up more information about the company's foundation. So, for example, the Target Foundation. I would go to GuideStar, where I can register for free, do a search for the corporate foundation name, and then find that foundation's 990, which is the tax document that all nonprofit entities need to file with the IRS each year, to learn more information about how the foundation administers their charitable giving and if there are any guidelines. So this is a chart that breaks down um, revenue for nonprofit arts organizations in the United States. The stats are from 2011, but they really haven't changed since then. So if you look at this pie here, you'll see that for most nonprofit arts organizations in the United States, I won't say vast, but the majority of their income, 60%, comes from earned revenue. So ticket sales, merchandise sales, artwork sales, anything where you're giving something away or you are not giving something, you're selling something in exchange for money, a purchase. And the other 40% comes from contributed revenue. And in that 40% contributed revenue pie, you'll see that a pretty small sliver, 3%, of total income comes from corporate sponsorship or corporate grants, a little less than what's available from foundations. This chart really exists in the context of this presentation to demonstrate that you're not going to be making your 100% of your budget on corporate support. You should really be looking to make a pretty small percentage of your budget on corporate support. Really, when creating a sustainable fundraising plan, you want to be looking primarily at individual donors. Of the amount of income for arts organizations in the United States, you'll see that 24% comes from individual donors. So this is where you want to spend the vast majority of your time. But corporate support represents a significant enough chunk, and I'll say that for our fiscally sponsored projects, in 2015, it was actually around 4.3% of their income they received from corporate support, so a little bit higher than what the national average is. And it's incredibly competitive. Same thing with grants from foundations. This is a limited basket of money that is available to artists or arts organizations that are truly competitive fits and align with the needs of the corporation or what their priorities are to make an impact with their charitable giving. So to that end, when you're crafting your pitch or when you're thinking about how you're going to sell your work to a business that you want to fund it, you want to think about what goals that business has in making charitable contributions to projects like yours or to nonprofits that impact their community or their customers. And there are 4 buckets that you should kind of start to lump different potential corporate sponsors in. These 4 buckets really kind of can overlap, but these address some of the major reasons why a business gives. It's a little different from foundation support. So right now, there's a big deadline tomorrow for the MAP Fund, which is administered by the Creative Capital Foundation. They're not tied to a corporation. Their reason for giving is because they are a nonprofit organization that wants to see the performing arts in the United States thrive and be a diverse, living, breathing organism that affects not only other artists and other creatives, but the national community writ large. So their motive for giving isn't on here. And other foundations, other charitable entities, they exist they exist for charitable purposes, which is not really the case for corporations. They exist to make money for themselves and their investors to have a high bottom line. Okay, so here we go. Let's break down these four reasons for giving. Brand awareness and exposure. Companies who are interested in this reason for giving are eager to have their brand out there. They want to sponsor events that lots of people are going to attend so that their logo is seen by as many human eyes as possible. Most likely, these are companies that have very visible products that require broad brand exposure to break through the clutter. So, McDonald's, Nike, big corporations that have a product that is in competition against other products. If you have an event that attracts a lot of people or you have a deep network, you'll be more successful in approaching these companies for event sponsorship, not necessarily donations, but someone that's saying, hey, because 10,000 people are going to be attending your arts festival, us, Nike, we want to put our logo on your posters or on your banners at the event. And really, for these type of corporations, it's a numbers game. So they are looking at what kind of impact in a numerical way you're making. How many people are going to be attending your event? An example I really like to use is Bank of America has every year sponsored Shakespeare in the Park by the Public Theater here in New York City in Central Park. And they do that because tens, if not hundreds of thousands of people are going to see posters in the New York City subway saying Shakespeare in the Park brought to you by Bank of America. They're going to sit in that theater. They're going to hear before the show, thank you to our sponsor, Bank of America. So it's really imperative that if other people are approaching Bank of America, they are competing with Shakespeare in the Park for their charitable dollars, for their corporate support, and would need to have an audience of equal size, at least, to be seen as a competitive candidate for funding in the eyes of that company. Okay, number two, impact impact-focused giving and strategic philanthropy. So, uh, believe it or not, not every company sees brand exposure as the number one criteria for making donations. In some cases, companies are very purposeful in their giving and want to see an impact beyond the number of people that are going to be affected. So here's one where you might try to think creatively about a company and what their mission is with the for-profit work that they do. For example, Whole Foods. What kind of things do you think of when you think of a brand like Whole Foods? You think of maybe um, sustainable agriculture, you think of organic produce, healthy eating, things like that. So it might stand to reason that if Whole Foods offers corporate giving, they would be interested in programs and organizations that are around healthy eating and sustainable farm practices, things like that. So these types of corporations are interested in programs that aim to solve social ills or address big picture topics that are relevant to their actual business activities. Um, let's see, maybe Aquafina would be interested in water purification projects in lesser developed countries, or American Express might be interested in helping programs that I'm just spitballing here. So if you guys have any good examples that you can think of, feel free to chime in. But American Express might be interested in helping support nonprofits that fund startup costs for small businesses or that help give loans to entrepreneurs, things like that. Um, and if you have a specific program that would engage the employees of these companies, like with volunteer opportunities, things that they can participate in directly to help further their corporate mission as well as the impact that you're trying to make in the community, you'll stand a better chance of getting that type of funding. So that's different from brand awareness and exposure. That's just about the number of eyes that are going to see their logo. Impact focused giving is aligning with the corporate mission statement and giving their employees the chance to make an impact themselves. Relationship and reputation building. So for some companies, the bread and butter of the organization is all in the handshake. Um, these companies want to make a difference. They want to have their name seen before as many people as possible. But at the same time, the company understands that having a positive reputation in their local community is part of their the success of their business. So this is an example where there's a Coke distribution plant in my hometown. Maybe Coke has an interest in the citizens of my hometown having a positive opinion of Coke so that they want to sponsor my local theater company. Just an example. If you have a board of directors or you're trying to create a board of directors, recruiting management or executives from these type of companies is a really good idea. They will have a stake in engaging with you and your organization, and will likely support their board seat with some type of financial contribution. What's important to remember is that your board or your nonprofit has some kind of offer to make to either them as an individual or their business, a way to kind of create new relationships in the community or introduce them to other stakeholders that might help them, open some doors with a market or resources that they don't otherwise have access to. Um, some examples beyond Coke would be maybe your local public utility companies, or um, really looking at businesses that have a local branch in your hometown, or that have some kind of vested interest in your specific community, would be ones that I would file into this bucket: relationship and reputation building. Finally, uh, I'm calling it the just because category. They've always done it. Some companies are donating to nonprofits because it's the right thing to do, or because their CEO believes in the work of a local nonprofit or organization, and has made it part of their personal mission to make a donation. Um, Similarly to the relationship and reputation building, you probably want to be cultivating a relationship with the key decision makers at a corporation that maybe you see gives to other nonprofits in your field or in your community, to see if you can get on their good side, and maybe um, they'll give you a grant next time around. So again, these four buckets are not mutually exclusive. Many companies are going to have more than one bucket of interests, maybe even all four. But the trick is to find out where the majority of the money sits. Which motivation is the company's primary interest? And again, you might be able to discern this from the guidelines that are on the corporation's website, or from their foundation's 990 that you can access on GuideStar. You can also glean it from seeing who else they've supported. On the 990 for foundations, you'll see a list of all organizations that they supported in that fiscal year. So when you're looking at it, and if you see like Fractured Atlas's name there a bunch of times, you'll know, hey, I'm actually a pretty good fit for this, because they fund fiscally sponsored projects, or they fund other artists that work with Fractured Atlas. Or maybe you'll see, if you're a theater company, you'll see other arts organizations or other theater companies in your neighborhood or in your region, and you'll know, hey, they fund organizations like mine. So looking at who else they're funding will, excuse me, absolutely help you determine which bucket uh, their needs and their goals fall in. So when you are thinking about how you're going to pitch yourself to them, um, you're going to want to massage your message to align with the bucket that you think best applies, or the handful of buckets that you think best apply to what their goals are. And part of that is being real specific about what your contribution, what your civic contribution to your local community is. And this should be fairly self-evident if you're working with uh, an audience that's larger than yourself, but you're going to want to be really explicit about it and explicit about how it aligns with the goals of the corporation that you're approaching. So let's see. So for Whole Foods, maybe I'm making a documentary film about um, farming practices in sub-Saharan Africa. I'm going to want to think about how that's kind of an obvious one, but for less obvious examples, you kind of want to think about how your work or how your project neatly aligns with what the corporation is interested in. Um, and sometimes this is going to be on the company's website. For example, Xerox. Um, let's see, I think I have a direct quote here from Xerox's website. Their goals are to help develop the next generation of scientists, engineers, inventors, and leaders. We believe in investing in the leaders of tomorrow. Um, uh, let's see. Other words that buzzwords that appear on their website: innovation, collaboration, fresh ideas. Um, you want to kind of look at what they say about themselves and what their giving is, steal some of that language and kind of embed it directly in your proposal. So if I were applying to Xerox, I'd be thinking, okay, what bucket are they in? What is my contribution to the local community? What do they say about themselves? So I see a lot of words like, fresh ideas, innovation. I would take some of those words and see how many times and how many different ways I can use them in whatever pitch that I'm writing. And finally, all of this is part of keeping in mind that, you know, uh, especially with corporate support, you are in a competition with likely lots of other local youth sports teams or lots of other film projects or lots of other local theater companies for their charitable dollars. So, what is your value proposition, not only to the community, but also to the corporation? So, for me to be able to say that uh, with our expertise, we are able to lift underdeveloped local schools who aren't able to provide arts programs to their students and raise their SAT scores by an average of, I don't know, what sounds good, 200 points through our arts curriculum. By making a grant to our program, Xerox, we're going to put your logo on our website, which is visited by 2,000 parents every month to learn more about how they can sign their child up for this program. So, just to recap this slide, finding a message that aligns with the needs of the funder, stealing language from their website or from any other public documents and repurposing it so that when you're stating your contribution to your local community and your value proposition, you're already kind of using the lingo that the people at that company will be familiar with and being explicit about the value proposition for your community or your field or your discipline and the corporation itself. Okay, so when we are looking for corporate grants, here's some kind of key guidelines that should help. Research should honestly take up a good deal. Oh, someone just told me they lost the volume. Is this true for everyone? Can you hear me? Is my voice coming through? Great. Sorry about that. Fantastic. Okay, so here's some guidelines for finding corporate funders. For almost every institutional funding opportunity, not just corporations, but also foundations, I tell people that research is where you should be spending a large amount of your time. Because if you are just kind of sending out blanket letters to all businesses or all foundations in your area, you're wasting your time. You really want to be thinking about who the best fits, the most perfect fits for your work are, and targeting them. Um, so when you're creating a longer list of prospects, you want to take each one of them and dig in more to learn about the organization you're soliciting. What are their areas of focus? Um, what are their deadlines? What are their guidelines? Who else have they funded? Who are the key decision makers? Um, have as much data as you can mine on each prospective funder before you pick up the phone to give them a call or start writing out a letter to them. Um, so this isn't just to spare funders from phone calls and solicitations from projects that aren't right for them. It's really about saving you time. Don't waste your time on funders that won't be the right fit. Do not waste your time. Um, Hail Marys can work in getting funding from a company that seems to only be peripherally involved in what your organization or project does. Um, you know, I, I work with some of these decision makers at the corporate giving offices or foundation offices, and they tell me all the time that they get a solicitation from a project that is beautifully put together. It's a immaculate slide deck, or it's a wonderfully written proposal that maybe is like 20 pages long, has all these details. They as a human being, as a reviewer that's reading it, really are interested in the work that they're doing. But unfortunately, oh, did my sound cut out again? Did my sound cut out again? I just want to, I feel like this is, oh, yeah, it's saying, great. I just had a little message pop up that my internet connection got lost. Hmm. Okay, well, just keep pinging me if anything cuts out, and I'll go back and repeat myself. But as I was saying, I'll hear from program officers with foundations or corporate giving programs who will be receiving an immaculately prepared presentation or proposal that they're really interested in, but they can only give to perfect matches. People or projects or organizations that perfectly align with what their charitable guidelines are. And so even if they care about your project on a personal level, um, before you spend hours and hours of time making proposals, make sure that you perfectly align. The second tip is to never under or overestimate the value of your brand. Corporations need to align themselves with the nonprofit community. They need to do that. Doing so allows companies to be seen as part of the community and as a company that gives back. No company wants to be seen as a miser or a Scrooge. Even the biggest corporations make a ton of money, have a lot of customers. They still need to have the optics, whether they truly care about giving back or not, they still need to have the optics of being seen as caring or giving back. So, but that's no matter what their motivation for giving is, they really need to think that their their stakeholders think, employees, community members, politicians, customers, etc. They need those people to think that they're part of something bigger than just selling their software or selling whatever widget they have is. And your organization, your project, you as an artist can play a role in that. But it's important that you never sell yourself short in underestimating the value of your nonprofit. So this is kind of a big rule of thumb for all fundraising, but you don't want to approach a corporation as a humble supplicant. I am a mere artist who is looking for money. You don't want to take the tone of of begging or panhandling. This is true of if you're approaching a foundation, if you're approaching individual donors, or if you're approaching corporate support. But I would say especially corporate support, because these businesses want to align themselves with winning enterprises, with winning organizations that are making an impact. Even if it's just with a couple hundred people and you're not Shakespeare in the Park yet, if you're making an impact, you need to stand strong and confident in appropriately valuing your brand. And approaching these corporations as partners where you're helping serve a need for them. You need to donate money to our community. Well, donate it to us because we are making a film that's going to be screened at local theaters. And before the film, they're going to see this project was brought to you by British Petroleum or whatever other corporation you might want to insert in there. The other half of this is that if you're not Shakespeare in the Park, you don't want to sell yourself to them as if you're a household name, right? So if you think that they are interested in brand awareness and brand exposure, if you don't have those tens of thousands of potential audience members, how else are you getting their name out there, and of what other value can you be to them? And if you know if you're not getting all of those eyes on your website or on your productions, then maybe they truly aren't a good fit. But being honest with yourself about that and appropriately estimating the value of your brand. Be clear about how you're going to help them. So again, they have those different motivations, and how can you address them? Can you provide volunteer opportunities for their employees? Can you offer them a seat on the board where you're helping them develop relationships with their business, with other local businesses? Are there different levels of giving that you can offer them where you say, hey, for $1,000 you have your logo on our website. For $5,000 we're going to say that you are a presenting sponsor where Bank of America brings you our great show. Um, so kind of having a list in your back pocket of different ways that you can actually help these corporate funders will help you as you figure out what their motivations are and craft a pitch for them. So who do you know? For those of you who aren't aware, in addition to our fiscal sponsorship program, Fractured Atlas has a service called Artfully, which is our online ticketing and customer relations management software. I'm not going to get too deep into it now, but with the customer relations management side of it, you should think of it as something of an online Rolodex. So every single contact that you've made, glad handing at networking events, filing them away somewhere safe so that then when you're working on a project that needs support, you can say, oh yeah, my cousin's husband works for the local mulching plant, so maybe I have an in there where I can say, hey, does your employer have some kind of charitable giving program where we can get some kind of sponsorship arrangement? With all institutional giving, foundation support, corporate support, there is a lot of relationship building that should go into it. It's not just about sending off your appeal to Coca-Cola, but do I actually know someone who might be related to the neighbor of a key decision maker at Coca-Cola that I can maybe leverage that relationship somehow? Um, uh, you know, Companies these days are very much excited to learn that their employees are already involved with potential nonprofits. Some might even require it before they consider you as a competitive applicant. So, how can you get employees of your local Coca-Cola bottling plant involved in your project before you solicit them and say, hey, already 10 of your employees act in our play. Maybe you want to give a little bit of a donation to help support our work. Um, Related to this relationship building advice is to not stop believing. This is true for foundations as well as corporations, but here's an example for corporate support that came up fairly recently. So one of our fiscally sponsored projects, he's actually kind of a big deal in the New York City theater scene, but he created a series of radio plays, and he reached out to the people at American Express. They have a foundation in addition to their corporate giving program, and he leveraged a way to get a meeting with the head of the American Express Foundation. I think the board president or the executive director of that foundation. 3 years later, American Express gives him Am I back? Can you hear me now? Thanks for letting me know that. Great. So 3 years later, 3 years after starting down this road with American Express, this fundraiser was awarded a $10,000 grant from them. That means that he probably sent at least 3 different proposals to a foundation where he'd already met with the the board president or the executive director before they actually awarded a grant. So he knew in his heart, he believed that this was an appropriate fit, that his project aligned with what American Express wanted to do. And he didn't just take that first rejection and say, okay, I'm not going to approach them again. He figured out how to actually hone his pitch so that 3 years down the road, they actually awarded him a grant, awarded him some corporate sponsorship. Okay, so and then the final thing. So in addition to GuideStar, I strongly recommend that you all check out the Foundation Center for all institutional funding. In order to access their online database of grants, you do need to sign up, and there is a sign up fee, or you can look to see if they have a physical location in a city near you. But if they don't, they have what is called a funding information network, which is a whole host of local libraries or community centers that you can visit and access their online database of grants for free. So this is going to be a bit more powerful than just going to GuideStar and looking up their 990, their tax document. Most foundations have a very extensive profile on the Foundation Center's website. This is true of corporate foundations as well, where you can see their board list and be like, oh, do I know any of these people? Or you can see you can see a breakdown of their guidelines for how they accept solicitations, what they care about, in addition to some more information about other organizations that they fund. Okay, so where to look? Start with local professional service outlets, so banks, private wealth management firms, and insurance agencies, law and accounting firms. These types of businesses are typically looking for they're looking to build their public profile. They're looking to access new customers, spread some goodwill. Um, that said, they might not necessarily have a formal application process. So this might be one where you have to pick up a phone and call your local State Farm agent or some other type of local service outlet to see, hey, do you guys have a discretionary budget for making sponsorships or grants to local nonprofits? And this is definitely a place where creating a relationship is always going to be good for you as an artist or you as an arts organization. Related to this are national chains. So Stop and Shop, Food Lion, Wawa, whatever local food market rings true to you. These will often have discretionary store-based budgets, and maybe it's not budgets for giving dollars, but maybe it's budgets for giving in-kind non-cash donations. So, okay, maybe Whole Foods isn't going to award me the $1,000 that I need, but maybe I can ask them to donate some food platters to our next fundraising event. Major sports franchises. I happen to know that Yankee Stadium has a charitable giving fund. They have awarded a local Bronx-based arts project with corporate support for the last couple years. So do you have a major league team in your neck of the woods that might be interested in supporting the work that you're doing? Check them out. See if they have a foundation that awards grants. In-kind advertising from media sources. So if there's some kind of, if you can figure out how to write a Huffington Post article that's relevant to the work that you're doing while also pushing people to your organization website, go right ahead and do that. See if you can get your name out there that way. Our executive director has had some success in writing blog posts that Huffington Post has run with. But obviously don't limit yourself to Huffington Post just because that's the one example I can come up with right now. Look at other blogs or other websites that have interests that might align with the work that you're doing and see if you can get some free advertising out of them by maybe writing some content for their website. And finally, matching gifts. It's my opinion that artists and arts organizations are leaving a lot of money on the table by ignoring the value of matching gift programs. Businesses of all size like to incentivize their employees to give to nonprofits that they care about by offering a matching gift program as an HR bonus. This is a great way to help double, if not triple, in some cases for very generous companies, the charitable giving that their employees have. So, what I like to tell people is, not only are you writing your donors a thank you note, you're saying, hey, thank you so much for your $100 donation. By any chance, does your employer happen to have a matching gift opportunity that we can take advantage of? If you have an online CRM like Artfully, you should be keeping track of what donors or what employers your donors work for. So you know that your cousin works for Bank of America. You're going to say, hey, please make a $100 donation to my Indiegogo campaign. Also, I happen to know that Bank of America has a generous matching gift program. So if you donate, you can really double the impact of your work by making a donation and then having Bank of America make a matching gift to our project. This is also a good way to get in with some of these business sponsorship programs by being able to say down the road, your employees have donated to our work. You've made matching gifts to us. Now will you consider making a charitable grant or corporate sponsorship payment to our project, to our organization? So these are some examples of corporations, of businesses that have both, that have either or foundation support or sponsorship opportunities. So remember, there's a distinction between sponsorship, where there's a quid pro quo usually, and foundation support, where there is more of a primarily charitable purpose. So these are ones that you might want to check out. Um, Looking at this list, you'll see that these are pretty big names. Whole Foods has a pretty good in-kind non-cash donation program, but you'll want to look at what are other things. Local breweries, local you know local stores that might be able to offer in-kind support. Hey, I know a clothing store down the street from the theater where our dance performance is going up. Maybe they'll be interested in knowing that we expect 1,500 people will come see our performance this weekend, so maybe they want to buy an ad from us or make a donation so that we put their logo in the program or say that they're one of our sponsors. Um, and you might want to look at things that are kind of regional specific. For example, Bank of the West. They're probably going to want to fund projects that are just in California primarily, or other West Coast states. Or if a larger corporation has kind of a regional focus, if let's see, I'm trying to think of a good example of this. So Delta, for example. Delta? It's either Delta or JetBlue. Maybe they both are. They're both one of them is based out of Atlanta, right? So even though they service the entire country and the world, they're probably going to be primarily interested in funding projects that are Atlanta specific. Maybe that's where they're going to want to see local volunteer opportunities. That's too bad that you keep losing me. Sorry about that. I might send you a better recording of this down the road. Is my voice back? Am I there? Great. So I was just saying, again, either Delta or JetBlue, whichever one's based out of Atlanta, they probably would be primarily interested in funding projects in Atlanta, even though they're a nationwide or international company. Okay, so things to think about when putting together a proposal. A lot of corporate funders, especially compared to um, foundations, are going to have online forms to submit. But usually there's either going to be a letter of inquiry or letter of intent or a full proposal that you're going to submit. So a letter of intent is really a miniature version of what a full proposal would look like, where you're kind of giving them a taste of what you're doing, how it's a good fit for them, and hoping to submit some kind of a fuller proposal or be invited to submit a longer proposal somewhere down the road. Um, these are the things to keep in mind about an LOI. I'm not going to read them all out loud. Um, have I been lost again? Uh, oh, great. Some people can hear me. Other people there seems to be a mixed bag here about who can hear me and who can't. Some people have had no problems. Other people have had lots of problems. So I'm sorry about that. Again, I'm going to send a link to this recording, which will hopefully have the the complete audio included with it tomorrow. But I'm not going to read this out loud. These are things to think about. I will highlight at the bottom an ask amount. That's very important that you have. Maybe you provide several different ask amounts, so you have different levels of support that you can have a corporation opt into. And this is what might go into a full proposal. Again, it's very important to follow the guidelines. Don't just do all of the things on this checklist because I'm telling you to. Look at what the funder puts on their website about what they want to see. So follow those guidelines to the letter, but this is often what's going to go into it, something along these lines. And then finally, this is a little bit about our grant review process. So we require 10 business days prior to any deadlines to review and sign off on corporate solicitation materials. So keep that in mind on your calendar. Send us your narrative and your budgets. We don't really need like press clippings or work samples that you might be submitting as well. Just the meat and potatoes of your actual application. What we're looking for is to see that the standard text for grants is included. What that means is if you go to your fiscal sponsorship program manual, this is a document that was emailed to you when you were approved for sponsorship, but is also on your My Fiscal Sponsorship page on our website. On pages 22 to 23 of that manual, you will see some 2 or 3 sentence text that succinctly describes the fiscal sponsorship relationship for corporations and foundations. We'll also be looking to see that your ask amount is appropriate. So almost no corporation is going to grant you 100% of your budget. Likely they're going to give you a pretty small percent of your budget. So we're going to want to see that whatever amount you're asking for is relative to the total cost of your project. We'll also be looking to see that your budget is sensical. There's a separate budget webinar that you might want to check out. If you go to our website and you click on the help menu at the top, you'll see that in the drop-down menu there is a link to our knowledge base. And if you get to the fiscal sponsorship area of the knowledge base, all the way at the bottom, there's a link to where archived webinar recordings live. This is where this recording is going to live. It's where our budgeting webinar recording lives. So check that out. And we'll also be looking to just make sure that you have a good proposal and that there isn't any kind of tips or tricks that we can offer to help maximize the effectiveness of it. I want to quickly recommend some of these books. There are 4 grants in general, so that's going to be for both foundation support and corporate support. These are ones that live in our library here in the office that we refer to frequently, so they're ones that you might want to check out as well. And I'm going to open up for questions now, but I also wanted to quickly plug all of the webinars in our series. This fall, we are offering at least 2 webinars a week, one on Tuesday nights, and then usually one on Wednesday or Thursdays in the afternoon. So check out the fiscal sponsorship area of our website to see a full calendar of upcoming webinars. Okay, so thank you so much for taking time out of your afternoon to join me in this call. I'm now going to open up for questions. I've only had one chatted to me so far, which is great. Oh, someone asked, will we have access to this recording? Yes, I'm going to email everyone a link to the full recording, likely tomorrow. It's going to be hosted on YouTube, so it's just going to be a YouTube link that I'm going to be sending you. Okay. Does Fractionalis require us to send them a corporate grant or funding application prior to us submitting it? So the answer in general is yes. Any opportunity that requires 501c3 status or a fiscal sponsor will likely need some kind of info or supplemental documentation from or about Fractured Atlas. So in order for us to provide that, we need you to send us your proposal so that we can review and sign off on it first. And as I mentioned on one of the last slides, we require 10 business days to review and approve corporate sponsorship or corporate grant applications or proposals. Any other questions? Oh boy, this is a good long one. I'm going to read it out loud. How do you recommend an initial approach in the focus giving strategic philanthropy category for smaller regional companies that are heavily involved in sectors related to one's art making, but likely don't have official application processes? Should we send a general email gauging their interest or actually talk about specific projects for which we're seeking funding and or quid pro quo we could offer them in return? So I would take a multi-pronged approach. Most most businesses are going to have some kind of generic contact us form on their site. I wouldn't just go off of that. I would try to speak to someone on the phone, even if it's just a general 1-800 number to say, hey, does your company offer corporate sponsorships to local nonprofits? And then you're going to get an easy yes or no answer, or you're going to get transferred and referred a couple times. And hopefully you'll arrive at someone's voicemail where you'll have a human name for, this is Charlie Smith. This is the person that handles their corporate giving program. Now I know who this person is. And yes, have all of this kind of prepared. What are the specific projects? How does your work align with what sectors they're interested in and what the quid pro quo is? What I would start with, if they don't have a website though, is so you get to Charlie Smith's voicemail, maybe he or she gives you a call back. What the tact you should take is, okay, I know there's not much info available about your corporate sponsorship program, but I'm interested in learning more about what your priorities are as a company for supporting local nonprofits or nonprofit causes. And then you hear and you're like, oh, well, maybe this isn't a good fit for me. Or you say, oh, that's very interesting. I'd like to tell you a little bit more about our company. Is there some possibility of me sending in a fuller written proposal for you to consider? So starting from that perspective, where you're reaching out to learn about what they care about, and then if there is a fit, doing a brief, elevator pitch on what work you're doing, trying to be offered the opportunity to submit a fuller proposal. Is that the case with just corporate? So I assume this question is about our review process. So we would want to see all institutional funding applications, either from corporations, from the government, or from foundations, at least 10 business days in advance, so that we can sign off on it, provide whatever info or documentation is needed from us, and then you can send that off to the funder. Is there a list somewhere of corporations who accept fiscally sponsored projects? You mentioned GuideStar 990s as a source, but is there another list? So buried somewhere deep on our website is a list of institutional funders that we've received grants from before in the past. This will include foundations and corporations. We operate under the assumption that most organizations are going to work with a fiscal sponsor unless they explicitly say otherwise. When you have a conversation with a funder, if you're picking up the phone to talk to someone, that's a pretty important question to be asking is, do you work with fiscal sponsors or fiscal agents? You'll actually find that most people are probably not going to, like most program officers, might not be familiar with fiscal sponsorship. And if there's anyone that you want us to provide more information to, if Charlie Smith at your local company needs more info about what Fractured Atlas or fiscal sponsorship is, by all means, put us in touch with them. Send us their contact info. But there isn't really an ongoing list anywhere of funders that definitely work with fiscal sponsors or don't. Okay, any other questions? It's 4 o'clock. I have a few emails and phone calls to make, so I'm happy to end the call here. Again, thank you guys so much for attending the call. I'm going to send you all a link to the recording of this webinar, as well as the slides, tomorrow, so you can expect to see that in your inbox then. And if you have any questions, feel free to give us a call or email us at support@fracturedatlas.org. Thanks so much, and enjoy the rest of your day.